Duluth. Years ago, when I first heard that there was somewhere in the vast terra incognita, somewhere in the bleak regions of the great Northwest, a stream of water known to the nomadic inhabitants of the neighborhood of the river St. Croix, I became satisfied that the construction of a railroad from that raging torrent to some point of the civilized world was essential to the happiness and prosperity of the American people, if not absolutely indispensable to the perpetuity of the republican institutions on this continent. I felt instinctively that the boundless resources of the prolific region of sand and pine shrubbery would never be fully developed without a railroad constructed and equipped with the expense of the government, and perhaps not then. I had an abiding presentiment that, some day or another, the people of this whole country, irrespective of the party affiliations, regardless of sectional prejudices, and without distinction of race, color, and previous condition of servitude, would rise in their majesty and demand an outlet for the enormous agricultural productions of those vast and fertile pine barrens, drained in the rainy season by the surging waters of the turbid St. Croix. Now, sir, who, after listening to this epithet and unequivocal testimony of these intelligent, competent, and able-bodied witnesses, who that is not incredulous to St. Thomas himself, will doubt for a moment that the Goshen of America is to be found in the sandy valleys and upon the pine-clad hills of St. Croix? Who will have the hardihood to rise in his seat in this floor and assert that, except in the pine bushes, the entire region would not produce vegetation enough in 10 years to fatten a grasshopper? Where is a patriot who is willing that his country shall incur the peril of remaining another day without an amplest railroad connection with such an inexhaustible mine of agricultural wealth? Duluth! The word fell upon my ear with peculiar and indescribable charm, like a gentle murmur of a low fountain stealing forth from the midst of roses, with the soft, sweet accents of the angels whispering the bright and joyous dreams of sleeping innocence. Duluth! 'Twas the name for which my soul had panted for years, as the hart panteth for water-brooks. But where is Duluth? Never in all my limited reading had my vision been gladdened by seeing the celestial word in print, and I felt the profounder humiliation of my ignorance that its dulcet syllables had never before ravished or delighted my ear. I was certain that the draftsman of this bill had never heard of it, or it would have been designated as one of the termini of the road. I asked my friends about it, but they knew nothing of it. I rushed to the library and examined all the maps I could find. I discovered in one of them a delicate hairline line diverging from the Mississippi near a place marked Prescott, which I suppose was intended to represent the St. Croix, but I could nowhere find Duluth. Nevertheless, I was confident it existed somewhere, and that its discovery would constitute the crowning glory of the present century, if not of all modern times. I knew it was bound to exist in the very nature of things, that the symmetry and perfection of our planetary system would be incomplete without it, and that elements of material nature would long since have resolved themselves back into original chaos if there had not been such a hiatus in creation as would have resulted from leaving out Duluth. In fact, sir, I was overwhelmed with the conviction that Duluth not only existed somewhere, but that, wherever it was a great and glorious place. I was convinced that the greatest calamity that ever befell the benighted nations of the ancient world was in their having passed away without the knowledge of the actual existence of Duluth. That their fabled Atlantis would never save by the hollowed vision of inspired poesy, as, in fact, by another name for Duluth. That the golden orchard of Hephaestus was but a poetical synonym for the beer gardens in the vicinity of Duluth. I was certain that the Heteronius had died a miserable death because in all his travels and with all his geographical research he had never heard of Duluth. I knew that if the immortal spirit of Homer could look down from another heaven that created his own celestial genius upon the long lines of pilgrims from every nation of the earth, and the gushing fountain of poesy opened by the touch of his magic wand, if he could be permitted to behold the vast assemblage of grand and glorious productions in the lyric art, called into being by his own inspired strains, he would weep bitter tears of anguish, instead of not then been more blessed to the lot to crystallize the deathless song and rise in glories of Duluth. Yet, sir, if it had not been for this map kindly furnished me by the legislature of Minnesota, I might have gone down in my obscure and humble grave in the agony and despair because could nowhere find Duluth. Had such been my melancholy fate, I have no doubt that with the last feeble pulsation of my beating heart, with the last faint exhalation of my fleeting breath, I would have whispered, "Where's Duluth?" But thanks to the beneficence of that band of ministering angels who rend their bright abodes in the far-off capital of Minnesota, just as the agony of my anxiety was about to culminate in a frenzy of despair, this blessed map was placed into my hands, and as I unfolded it, a resplendent sense of ineffable glory opened before me, such as I imagined burst upon the enraptured vision of the wandering pair through the opening gates of paradise. There for the first time, my enchanted eye rested upon the ravishing word, Duluth. If gentlemen will examine it, they will find Duluth not only in the center of the map, but repressed in the center of a series of concentric circles 100 miles apart, and some of them as much as 4,000 miles in diameter, embracing alike the tremendous sweep of fragrant savannas in the sunlit south, and the eternal solitudes of snow that mantle the ice-bound north. How these circles were produced is perhaps one of the most primordial mysteries that one of the most skillful paleontologists will never be able to explain. But the fact is, sir, Duluth is preeminently a central place, for I am told by gentlemen who have been so reckless of their own personal safety as to venture away from those awful regions where Duluth is supposed to be, that it is so exact the center of the visible universe that the sky comes down at precisely the same distance all around. I find by reference to this map that Duluth is situated somewhere near the western end of Lake Superior, but as there is no dot or other mark indicating its exact location, I am unable to say whether it is actually confined in a particular spot, or whether it is just lying around there loose. I really cannot tell whether it is one of those ethereal creations of intellectual frostwork, more intangible than the rose-tinted clouds of the summer sunset, or one of those airy exaltations of the spectacular's brain, which I am told are ever flitting in the forms of towns and cities along those lines of the railroad built by government subsidies, luring the unwary settler as a mirage as the desert lures the famishing traveler on, and ever on, until it fades away into the darkening horizon, or whether it is a real, bona fide, substantial city, all staked off with the lots marked with their owners' names, like that proud commercial metropolis recently discovered on the discoverable shores of San Domingo. But however that may be, I am satisfied Duluth is there or thereabout, for I see it stated here on this map that exactly 3,990 miles from Liverpool, though I have no doubt for the sake of convenience it will be moved back 10 miles to make the distance an even 4,000. Then, sir, it is the climate of Duluth unquestionably the most salubrious and delightful to be found anywhere on the Lord's earth. Now, I have always been under the impression, as I presume the other gentlemen have, that the region around Lake Superior is cold enough at least 9 months of the year to freeze the smokestack of a locomotive. But I see that represented on this map that Duluth is situated exactly halfway between the latitudes of Paris and Venice, so that gentlemen who have inhaled the exhilarating airs of one and basked in the golden sunlight of the other may see at a glance that Duluth must be a place of untold delights. A terrestrial paradise, fanned by the balmy zephyrs of an eternal spring, clothed in the gorgeous sheen of the ever-blooming flowers, and vocal with the silvery melodies of nature's choicest songsters. In fact, sir, I have seen on this map, I have no doubt that Byron was vainly endeavoring to convey some faint conception of the delicious charms of Duluth, and his poetic soul gushed forth in the rippling strains of that beautiful rhapsody. Know ye the land of cedar and vine, where the flowers ever blossom and the beams ever shine, where the light wings of the zephyr, oppressed with perfume, was wax faint over gardens and the gull over bloom, where the citron and olive are fairest of fruit, and the voice of the nightingale never is mute, where the tints of the earth and the hues of the sky, in colour though varied, and beauty may vie. As to the commercial resources of Duluth, sir, they are simply illimitable and inexhaustible, as shown here on the map. And see it stated here that there is a vast scope of territory, embracing an area of over 2 million square miles, rich in every element of material wealth and commercial property, all tributary to Duluth. Look at it, sir. Here are the inexhaustible mines of gold, immeasurable veins of silver, impenetrable depths of boundless forest, vast coal measures, wide extended plains, and the richest pasturage, all embraced in this vast territory, which must, in its very nature of things, empty the untold treasures of its commerce into the lap of Duluth. Look at it, sir. Do you not see from these broad brown lines drawn around this immense territory that it is an enterprise and inhabitants of Duluth intend someday to enclose it all in one vast growl, so that its commerce will be bound to go there whether it would or not? And here, sir, I find within this convenient distance of the Penguin Indians, which, of all the many accessible parts of the glory of Duluth, I consider by the far the most inestimable. For, sir, I have been told that when the smallpox breaks out amongst the women and children of that famous tribe, as it sometimes does, they afford the finest subjects in the world for strategical experiments of any enterprising military hero who desires to improve himself in the noble art of war, especially for the valiant lieutenant general, whose trenchant blade Toledo trusty for the want of fighting has grown rusty, and eats into itself for lack of somebody to hew and hack.